knives, and perhaps even draw knives. I've restored 3 draw knives. Todd Mocha and I've talked about one of the draw knives that he's working on himself. Before I start though, I'm going to read what I feel is the most perfect disclaimer. And I've decided, I found this, I made a copy of it, and I've decided that I'm adopting this as my disclaimer for life. It says, "This information is presented in good faith. I am not a professional, just a guy confident enough to do a job myself. This video reflects how I did it." Well, okay, it'd be this demonstration. Reflects how I did it and my personal experiences. No warranty, guarantee is expressed or implied, and I am not responsible for any physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual injury or death that may occur. I told my wife I had no idea I was creating spiritual injury when I worked around the house. She said, "That's not you, that's us having to deal with you." But so that's my disclaimer. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk with you guys about some of the stuff that I found that's worked for me. As you guys know, I teach kids Decoy carving class. I made my own knives for that class, and it was kind of funny. After making about 16 or 18 knives, I remember thinking, man, I've got enough knives there, I could do a class. And that kind of led us, the thought anyway, into starting this class. What I did was started making my own knives, found some things that worked for me, found some things that I like, that I don't like. And I'm going to share some of my pet peeves with you guys, and I'm going to give you some ideas on what might help you guys out with sharpening knives. How many guys are happy with your sharpening abilities? How many carve with knives, chisels, or gouges? Okay. Do any of you guys not carve with those because you're not happy with how sharp you get them? Or you plug away anyway? Okay. Well, one of the things when we teach our kids is we let them know that, hey, a sharp tool is going to be much safer than a dull tool, because it just makes sense. You're having to apply so much pressure into a dull tool that you have, by the time you cut through that wood, you have no control over it. So one of the things that I try to do is I try to have all of our knives honed, sharpened, razor sharp, ready for them to go. And that's my task, is I'll have 25 to 50, depends on if they're changing tools out each time, but I'll have between 25 and 50 tools that I'll hone, and it's usually not that big of a deal. It's usually either using a leather honing device. Does everybody have one of these? Does anybody need one of these? I have leather that's been given to me galore. If anybody does not have one of these, let me know. We'll get one. Recommend putting it onto just a block of wood, whatever size. I found it interesting. I did a quick Google search last night. What's the best type of glue put on there? And the boy, one says, do not use wood glue. The other one says, wood glue, tight bond, all the way. Epoxy. I've come to the conclusion that it doesn't matter what kind of glue that you put it on there. There's honing powders and such that you put on there, and everybody has their own opinion as to what's the best honing powder. I've used this one, which is actually take it out. It's just a white, they call it a gold compound. To me, it's no different than the one that in appearance anyway, it looks no different than what I've gotten before. Put that on, a little bit of oil. You can also use, I bought this back when Nelson Johnson was in business 20 some years ago. He didn't tell me that's a lifetime supply. If you need help with getting a leather strap put together when prepped and such, let me know, because I've got all kinds of stuff to do that. Bruce brought in a knife that I thought was fantastic. It's the exact same knife, I believe. It's a Murphy knife. When I started carving, I was pretty good at sharpening big knives, but I had a really tough time sharpening these little guys. And I thought this was perfect because I went down to the wood carving store. It used to be on the lake, formerly known as
Woodcraft?
pardon?
Is it woodcraft?
No. Chris Ephraim had the wood carving school
The Greek guy?
store. Pardon?
The Greek guy?
Yeah.
The Greek guy?
Yes, he's Greek. He was actually from Greece, and that was one of the things. Chris had a very, very heavy Greek accent, and he was hard to understand what he meant by what he was telling me. And I finally figured out how to carve or how to sharpen a carving knife, but instead of having that much knife, that's Bruce Bauer's knife, I ended up with this tiny little bugger here. I wasted more of the knife on there. Yeah, one of the things that I would advise you guys is that you may go through a knife or two in learning how to actually get good at sharpening. So with that in mind, what I would recommend is Chicago cutlery. Everybody's heard of those. They're paring knives. We actually use those for our kids' carving class. If you drop the blade back, these actually make very nice little cork carving knives. Nice thing with these is you can usually find them at thrift shops for about $1 or $2. Worth taking a chance on. But I'd recommend trying sharpening something like this. Metal's a little softer than even a guy like this one. When you get in some of your higher end knives, the metal gets to be a little bit more tempered, and they're a little harder to sharpen. So recommend practicing on something like this. Likewise with the chisel. I bought probably 40 pounds of chisels from a municipal arts teacher up in the Anoka area. Best purchase I ever made. The thing was all I could do to get it out to my truck, but we made, I don't even know how many of these chisels that I've got sharpened so far, and I've still got a whole bunch left. I call this my box of shame, because there's an awful lot of abuse that happens with chisels. Real quick, does everybody know the difference with tempering? For instance, do you know why you can use a screwdriver to do what you do a screwdriver with, but you shouldn't use a chisel for that? It all has to do with the tempering. It all has to do with the tempering. This is one that, to me, it's a lost cause. Somebody actually tried using this as a pry. They snapped it off. Chisels are very high tempered steel, so you don't want to use those as any kind of a pry. He's got quite the bend in that guy too. It's actually kind of impressive. And then they, instead of putting a handle on it, decided to use a hammer to mash it on the end. And, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself there. When I started learning how to make knives, I kind of borrowed an idea off from the old straight edge razors. Now, I love these straight edge razors. I look at antique stores. I love this one. You look and see it's damaged right here. Was able to pick it up for real cheap. This is going to eventually become a carving knife. Now, how many of you guys, when you went to the barber, either got an actual shave or at least did the back of your hair? Anybody? There's guys older than me. Okay, you remember seeing the barber take the straight edge razor like this, take a strap similar to this. It seems to me that they had these strapped on the chair, and they'd take the knife and they'd go, and everybody thought they were geniuses at being able to sharpen. At least I did. Well, I was really quite amazed when I started taking these things apart and making them into knives to find out how many of these were wore out along this big back end here. That's the guide that they use for sharpening the knives. They're not, barbers weren't anything special. Basically what they did is they just set that thing down like at that angle like that. It rolled across the back here, and I looked at that and I thought, hey, wait a minute. That's a simple way to sharpen a knife. So how do you make a knife and put that type of a wedge on it? Well, what I started doing, I believe, I don't know if this is one that actually made out of that. What I did is I started getting the thickness of the back of the blade down to what I wanted, and then taking that blade and doing one bevel. Instead of doing a double bevel like a lot of knives have, I'm putting on a single bevel onto that knife. Which, Tom, you have Tupelo knives. Isn't that not what a Tupelo knife is? It's a single bevel down to the blade, pretty much. At least that's I've read about Tupelo knives. I've never owned one, but it's my understanding is that what they're looking for is a single bevel. Let's see. I had a sheet.
With a single bevel,
Pardon?
do you just sharpen the one side of the single bevel then?
No, what I will do, actually, what I'll do is I will demonstrate a couple of the knives that I actually am making here. I don't remember who it was. They looked at one of these knives and said, "Oh my goodness, you could use this for butchering a cow or something else," because it still has quite a bit of a back on it here. One of the things that I'll use a couple different tools when I'm trying to get these thinned down. I will use either a belt sander. I will use this part of the sander. This is about the only thing I use this for, is for shaping the knives, getting them close to being ready for the final shaping of those. I'm supposed to have my face shield with me, and I don't think I brought it with me. When you do this, when you create sparks, it's very, very, very important to not get those in your eyes. I made that mistake one time, and my neighbor said, "Oh, that's so cool because she's a magnet and pulled the metal out." That wasn't it at all. It was put your chin on the strap and then pull I'm going to use the squeezers and pull that out of that big chunk of metal out of your eye. And by the way, don't blink. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Now, I don't wear gloves when I'm doing this process because that's already been heat treated, and I am not good enough. I'm not a forger. I do not know how to get the tempering back into these things. So as long as I don't have these hotter than what I can hold in my hand, I can work these all day long. I usually work 3 of them at a time, 4 or 5 of them at a time. And what I'll do is I'll keep a bucket of water nearby. Again, there's different opinions. Some say use oil. Oil seems really dirty to me, so I'm going to use the water. Real fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to toss that guy right into the water and let it cool down. By the time I'm ready to come back to these, they cool down. There's no heat left back in these again. So I also have the option of using this guy here, but this one might be a little bit wore out. I'm going to give this one a try. What I'm going to do, right now all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take the back off from these, get them down close to where they're ready to be made into knives. This one actually is very, very close.
Are you just eyeballing that, Dave?
Eyeballing?
Yeah,
I could get out caliper. I could get out the caliper. I have done that at times. I find that it's not that vital, that I'm not going for anything that precise, that I need to have right down to the 1/100th of an inch. Pardon? Well, I thought I heard something. So, So I'm thinking this one's actually quite good. I'm going to be done with that one. I'm just going to concentrate on this guy here. Now, years ago, my exposure to diamond sharpeners were the larger guys like this one. I hate these. I hate these with a passion. They might be okay for bigger knives, but they're no good for little carving knives as far as I'm concerned. They right over the top of these leg spots. I hated how they work. I was introduced to this type of a diamond stone. These are phenomenal. If you don't have one, these are kind of spendy. If you don't have one, I've got another alternative, and I love the combination of these two guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knife. I have a handout that I wanted to show you guys. I'm going to back up here real quick. One of the things Chris Ephraim had told me in very broken English was, I asked him, I said, why is it that I can get my buck knife sharp, razor sharp? I can shave my arm off, hair off my arm, but I can't get these carving knives sharp. And he said, well, with most paring knives, most kitchen knives, most butcher knives, fillet knives, they all have this wide angle like this. It's about a 30-degree angle. And he said, what you want with a carving knife is about a 17-degree angle. So you're dropping that down and giving that a much tighter wedge, if you will. And he said, the reason for that is that when you have, I brought one of these ridiculously large knives, when you have a double bevel on here, this part of the knife develops a shoulder. Now, when you're carving, when you're butchering an animal, when you're coming in contact with bone, you want that type of a bevel because you're keeping that blade a little stronger. So you can hit a bone once or twice before you're actually having to go back and resharpen it. But now when we're carving, this part here, actually, as you push the wood, the knife into the wood, that shoulder hits and it works to bring the knife back up out of the wood. So you're fighting yourself, you're fighting the knife when you do that. So what Chris told me, didn't quite get it because he had a very tough accent to understand, is that you're dropping that carving knife back to the 17-degree or so angle. Now you can get that to push into the wood and it stays in the wood and it's able to make a much cleaner cut. I brought that one because that might be a little easier to see across the room than it is for something this small. So what I did is I came back to that bevel with the straight edge razor. I was at Rockford yesterday and I noticed that they had a tri-stone that, similar to this, instead of the Arkansas soft stone on it, it has a diamond blade similar to this. It's a very smart, well thought out little stone. The reason being is that these soft stones are just that, they're soft. You use these any length of time, they are no longer flat. I took this out many years ago and ran it across the rough concrete of my driveway, and I managed to get it close to flat again, but then after using it a little bit, it's got that darn concave edge in it. Just, they get that way from use, and that's, I have a kind of a dislike for that stone. This actually works much better for that. So, I don't know if you can see this or not, but what I'm doing is I'm actually riding this knife right across this whole section right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to that. I'm going to try and get all of the shoulder off from here, all of the shoulder off from here, and get it down to the point where I have a straight edge. Now, I'm probably not going to get that tonight. One of the things I like is I'll sit and I'll watch television and do this. As long as it's not squeaking too bad, it doesn't bother my wife. As soon as it starts squeaking, she makes me go to the other room. So it's getting really close right there. Frank, when we were at Game Fair together, you were using a stone like this. You were putting an oil on this. What was that oil?
Just mineral oil.
Mineral oil.
Just a cheap, I guess you can buy it at drugstores or, but it's not like machine oil or it's just mineral.
Is-
Just enough to float the debris away.
What we're trying to do with that oil is to keep the metal particles from actually plugging up
Right.
in the diamond. Now, I don't use that as much, for one thing, especially when I'm doing chisels. I like to hold this in my hand. I like to be able to see that edge. This was in that box. There's like no practical use for this thing here, except for that it can be seen from across the room. When I'm sharpening a chisel, I like to be able to see if this face is flat on the stone. And then what I'll do is I'll lock my wrist in that location, or in that position, and I'll use my thumb as a guide to keep this thing from rocking, because the worst part with blades is if you start doing this type of an action as you're working it, you end up getting, I have a planer in here, a little hand planer that I had sharpened years ago, and I did not realize why I could not use that blade. It was very dull, and it had to do with the fact that I kept rocking that blade as I was doing that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a diamond like this. It's still one of my favorites. I had a window guy turn me on to these years ago. This is a 400 grit. I'm sure that it's nothing more than emery cloth, but it's for a belt sander. I've only been able to get them from him, but he was using the polished glass. And if you can polish glass with emery cloth like that, I bet I can use that to sharpen a knife. And you can. And they'll last a number of years. Now, if I have a blade that's really needing extra work, I love this Diablo peel and stick sandpaper. I picked that up at Home Depot. Pop that on.
That's 400 grit?
This one is 220. This one is 400. I took a block of 2x4, made sure it's flat on the edge here. Cut it the size for the belt to fit on. And I took one of those little free paint stir sticks. It'd be easier if I had a pliers with me. Wedged it inside of there. I'm not going to pull it completely out, it's a little bit stuck there. That's just a spacer. It's easier to go on with the stick knot in there. Put it in there, it's nice and tight. So I can use that now if I have a lot of material that needs to come off. And I've just finished up with my diamond stone. I can actually take this guy and I can use this. And it's a nice go in between. This one doesn't usually chirp as loud. I'm not kicked out of the room quite as often when I'm doing this one. But again, I'll just sit and I'll watch television. and shape that down. Now when I get it to a point where I'm gonna pass this guy around. What I'm looking for is outside edge to not have any light refraction from it. Usually if there's light refraction, it's a spot that if it were enlarged, it would be coming up at an angle and then flattening out on top. And it's real small, but it's easy to see with light, about this kind of light refraction here. You can usually take that knife, rotate it back and forth, and you can see if there's any imperfections on it. Now, Doug, whenever I've brought knives in, you're one of the few guys that I've ever noticed who's actually taking and looking at that knife. Is that what you do?
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass around a couple of knives. I'm gonna see if I can find a couple that need some work done on them. This is a good example. I'm going to have you guys, as we're talking here, this one's got one spot on it that needs some work done on it. It's not terrible bad, but there's a spot on there that if I see that, I'm going to go back on here. I'm going to figure out, do I need to go with this grit of paper or this grit of paper? Usually, if you don't catch it at that very first part, all the honing in the world isn't going to make up for that first step that you missed there. So what I'm always doing is, again, when I have a knife, I'm rotating it in light. I'm looking for a spot that looks like it's a flat spot and try to take care of that, get it so that it's coming down to a fine tip. There should be no light refraction on it at all. This one's getting really close. Now, when I get to the point where I'm happy with it, I can have the choice honing it on this guy here. This is a fine diamond. That works really well too if you happen to have one of those. But I want to get that nice and shiny before I move on to any type of strop. We had a broken knife here too. Is there any questions at this point here?
What did you have for a belt on the Diablo when you started?
This one?
Yeah.
This one, I looked for the 120 grit. This one's pretty worn down. I was making a lot of knives with the planer blades that Todd had supplied me with a whole mess of those. And so this one's pretty worn down. I'm going to swap that out. But again, most of what I do is I'll use the rotary on this guy.
Is that 120 too?
This one is, yeah, probably 120, 180. I don't like to go much smaller than 180. It just tends to rip up the material too fast. So, Bruce brought this knife in that is real similar to what my friend Todd had up at his fish house here a couple weeks ago. Tip broke off. There again, if you when I teach my kids carving class, one of the things I'm looking for is when kids or adults are bringing that knife in and they'll try and peel or lift and try to break off the piece of wood rather than cut through it. If you try to break it off, again, these knives are usually pretty high temper steel. There's a good chance that you're going to do something like that. What I found with my friend Todd's, he had a diamond stone like this. We sat out in the fish house. In between fish, I just sat and rounded off. Now, for this particular one, it's a straight blade here. Curvature is on the back. That is the non-sharp spot, or non-sharp part of the blade. I don't want to change this part of the blade, but what I can do is I can go around the back side of this blade and bring this back down to a point. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just taking this come forward here. This is your knife now, right?
Say what?
This is your knife?
Yeah, it was
Okay. So, yeah, come up here.
actually a guy who I was selling his stuff, and he evidently dropped it.
Is that about what you want it to be?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as it meets at the end. Instead of being 90 degrees.
A little bit more on there. So, again, it looks like it's coming down to a nice point there. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna switch over to this guy here. It's a little rough on the edge here. Still sharp though.
And do you use any water at these times at all, Dave?
The only time I use water
You
is
spill it?
when I'm using these. Bruce, how much of that tip do you think was missing there? Was that about 1/8 of an inch?
Yeah, almost.
And is it back and forth or circular, or a little bit
Doesn't
of both?
matter.
It don't matter.
Little of both, doesn't really make too much difference. Now, depending on, I don't have whetstones here. That was actually a very good question. If you have stones that actually say that they are whetstones, you want to soak those in water. I thought I had one here. Guess not. You do want to soak those in water for, I believe it's 30 minutes prior to working with it. But I don't have any whetstones that I'm aware of anyway. Exciting, huh?
So the diamond is the most aggressive?
The diamond is definitely more aggressive. Unless I go to switch, I could switch down to one of these finer ones.
Oh.
These have a tendency to chirp. Which, that mineral oil that Frank was talking about will take care of that. And a little bit of chirping there. That usually gets me kicked out of the living room.
What grit was that, or what would they call that?
On the diamond,
Yeah.
it just says that it's a fine. I think these were in a box of stuff that we've got.
Those came from Jim.
Dave Jackson's family gave us a bunch of different tools, and I believe these two stones came in, and I don't know where the other one came from.
I think those just come as coarse, medium, and fine, and
Yeah.
extra fine, I think. They don't, I've never seen a grit as, shown
It's
on
from
them.
Yeah, these are both fine, and then of course this one is. Well, I thought I saw a course on this one at one point, but I'm not seeing it now. Did you guys see where the spot was on that knife?
Was that before?
Where was it?
No.
But not that one.
Dave, where was the spot? Where was the spot on that knife?
Right about here.
Okay.
Close to the back.
Yeah, I have the tip on this one pretty good. It's right about there that it starts getting a little bit funky. But that's what I'm looking for as I'm sharpening that knife is, if there's any what looks like the light refracting on it, that's usually, like I said, that's indicating a flat spot on there. So, this knife actually looks pretty good. I'm going to put it on, I'm going to use my hone. When you use a hone, it's important to use a pull stroke. If if the knife's even partially sharpened and you use push stroke, you're going to cut your leather, and that's counterproductive to what you're trying to do.
You're dragging it away from the edge?
That's correct. Instead of, again, this is the sharp edge here, so I'm sliding that backwards away from.
And the same amount of times on each side.
Now, Bruce, it has a little bit of scratches right here. Just because I want it to look a little nicer when I'm done, I'm going to sit here, take some of that out of there to see if
Yeah, like I
there's
said,
any
these are
scratches.
another guy's knives, and he had died, and we had about 35 of them that I ended up with, that I sold to club members. And then I just started looking at them, and I noticed the one had a tip broken on it, and that one was, what was wrong with that one? The other one was bent.
Did this one have a cover? Does this one have a cover?
No, it's just the one.
Just tape on that one.
Yeah, I got tape in everywhere.
Okay, so you have a way to protect it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna veer over into, I'm gonna kind of wrap up here with knives, because I do want to get over to chisels next. One of the things when I'm working with chisels, I've noticed that there's a lot of brands that put round handles on their chisels. And before I even start trying to sharpen a chisel or try to restore the thing, I want to make sure that that thing isn't going to roll off from a table. This one has about a 3/4 inch blade. It might be a little wider than that. It doesn't roll off the table. We got a round one here that to me is so stupid that they put a round handle on these things. So one of the first things that I'm going to do before I start putting all the time into sharpening the chisel is I'm going to take, and I did do this before, I'm going to create my own flat spot on here. What I'm hoping to do is have that so when it sits on a table, it sits nice and flat resting against that blade. I find this really important when we have our kids' tables out. Kids will be working on, we might have 4 kids on a table like this, and this poor old chisel sitting in there, and they're just hammering away, and that chisel's doing this type of thing. So I try to get a flat spot on there so that at least that thing isn't going to, it's going to take a little bit more to get the thing to roll. Now I'm not going to do a whole lot of sharpening with this one. I'm going to pass this guy around. This guy needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of love. This thing looks like it lost its edge. The angle on this thing here is really short. One of the things that I would want to do with this guy here is I would want to try to elongate this part of the plane. And you'll also notice this thing here has been used as a scraper, something like that. I'm sure because it wasn't cutting any other way, out of desperation they were trying to do that. So what ended up happening is it rounded off over the back. Have you guys take a look at that guy. Now, I have no shortage of chisels like that. Carpenters in particular are horribly abusive to chisels. Besides this one being used as a scraper, you got ones like this where he was pounding into something, he obviously hit a nail here, he took out a chunk out of it. Looked like he used it to spread construction adhesive. And I don't know what this white stuff is, but that's not coming off real easy. I kept this one because it's a Marples chisel, and this was Marples back when Marples was manufactured back in Shetland, England, which Shetland, England is one of the more notorious places for cutlery in the world. And so I bought this one. I haven't been able to quite bring myself to fix this one yet. We're gonna work on that one. Quick question, when you guys use a chisel, which way do you use it? Do you use it this way
I'm kind of impressed by that.
or this way?
First way.
The reason I ask, Phil Nelson, he helped me start my kids' class. Never occurred to me that you could use a chisel this way. And Tom, that's how you use a chisel, isn't it? The bevel is here, this way. Well, Phil and I had a very interesting conversation that night because I'm used to using it this way. And actually I dropped it down this way. Both work, it's just all what you get used to. But if you use the chisel this way, it's really important to have this bevel cut far enough back. That one isn't, but it's important to have this bevel cut back, otherwise you end up changing the angle that you're going through your wood. So what I found that has worked, there's a whole crap load of tools out there that are available for purchase. If you have $200, $300, $400, there's a whole bunch of tools out there that you can purchase. Tormix, Todd, you have a Tormix, don't you?
I've got a knockoff.
Okay. When you sharpen a chisel, you're not keeping a flat surface like this, are you? That has a bevel, that creates a bevel on it, if I recall correctly?
Oh, I've got a handheld one that does that.
Okay. There again, it's personal preference. I don't like that. I like to keep this as flat as possible. It's the same company, Worksharp, makes a really nice sharpener. Why we wouldn't use this sharpener for a chisel? Anybody know why?
Too small.
Well, yeah, yes, no. As this thing is spinning, your outer edge is going a lot slower than what the inner side is.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that's ever worked or seen a pivot in a field, you know that the wheels on that far edge of that pivot are having to go almost twice as fast as what the wheels towards the center is doing. Well, this is working the same way. If you try putting the chisel on here, there is this magic spot. Worksharp has it figured out and has it foolproof so you can use that. I don't know what it is, but whenever I've tried using a circular blade like this, what I find is that whatever's closest to the inside ends up being shaved down a whole lot quicker than what the other edge is. And I've tried doing this, then it ends up being short on the two edges and long in the center. What I found that works really well for doing chisels is a belt sander like this. And now there's a little gadget. Actually, I picked one up, but I don't think I got it in here tonight. I think it's still sitting on the back seat of my car, but I have an older one here. Just had it in my hand. Here it is. It's this little guy here. When I bought this one, it was $16. I bought one yesterday. Doggone it, like everything else, they raised the price. It's $20. It self-centers a chisel in here. Whoops. You have a couple different options on this. This also works great for planer blades. I can lower it down in here, tighten this down. They have the how many centimeters to get this thing at a 30-degree angle. 30 millimeters. Now that's assuming that this wheel is still pretty new. I've used this a number of times, so I don't know if that 30 centimeters is accurate or not. So what I'm going to do when I use this type of a guy, I'm going to put my chisel in there. I'm going to look at the side and see if that flat plane is resting here. Am I getting all of that blade? If you're in doubt, Usually I'd say you put Sharpie on there. That gives you a good indicator if you're taking the material off all the way across. This thing is so hopelessly rusted that actually is doing the job of that Sharpie. That actually doesn't look too bad. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lock this down somewhere in here. I have a screwdriver. There it is. I have a chisel that I could use as a screwdriver, but we already covered this, so that's not a good idea. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, my bad. Yeah, I like that. By the way, I've learned that from these younger kids. That if you say my bad, it absolves you of all responsibility. I wish I would have known that a long time ago. I could have saved so much money on liability insurance. All you gotta do is say my bad. All right, I gotta get that back up there a little bit more. Is that other one floating around here? That's the one I really wanted to work on. Awesome, thank you. And that one, mark this out ahead of time. Now, going back to what Chris was trying to tell me when it comes to chisels. Paraphrased, 90% of your sharpening is going to happen on this surface right here. About 10% is going to happen on this surface here. So even though this is rounded out on the back, I'm not going to mess around with this side too much. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to concentrate on this side right here. But I'm going to tighten it down a little better than I did that last one. Hopefully. So again, I'm going to put that on the belt sander. I'm going to keep my hand close to the top here because I want to make sure it's not heating up too much. Go a little bit further on this. I'm probably not going to get this completely tonight. Actually, I'm going to change that bevel a little bit. Back that off a little bit because I do want to take more of this.
Do you adjust that bevel just by moving that back and forth? The angle of the bevel is adjusted.
Yep, right. Based on how far it's sticking out here will change how much of this bevel I'm taking off.
How are you determining that measurement? Just putting it on the